Welcome to the Bothell City Council regular meeting of July 12th, 2016. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call. All council members are present. I was just going to take a quick moment to discuss or just have a moment of silence for the community. The tragic incident that happened in Dallas, Texas, where police officers from the Dallas Police Department as well as the Dallas Area Rapid Transit were murdered. And so our hearts and our thoughts go to their families and to their community. The chief wanted me also to make sure that everybody was thanked. The communities had an outpouring of support for the Bothell police officers, and a bunch of them are here tonight, and we just want you to know we thank you and appreciate everything you do for our community, and we feel very protected and very welcome here as a community because you're here. So let's have a moment of silence. All right, so I was told I do those for too long before, so I'm trying to figure out the right pace on a moment of silence. Meeting agenda approval, is there any changes to tonight's meeting agenda? Councilmember Samberg. Can you use James? Hold on, let me see if I turn my... Did any of your microphones work?
No.
They worked earlier.
So let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back. Actually, Councilmember Freed will be here in about 5 minutes anyway, so we'll take a 5-minute break and get the wireless speakers or microphones up here. So we'll be back at 6:10. Okay, the council's back. We have microphones now. So the meeting agenda approval, Councilmember Samberg.
Next Tuesday, July 19th, the Transportation Commission is meeting to discuss/decide whether to make the tolls that are currently free on 405 nights and weekends and holidays, whether they're going to make those permanent. And I wanted to add a discussion item at the end of the meeting to see if our council would like to take a position on that and send a letter to the Transportation Commission. And then there are also, this is an email that I sent to you, and then there's also to you and the city manager, issues relating to the tolling commission meeting, I guess also next week, and having our council take a formal position on things like requesting that excess toll revenue from 405 be dedicated to fixing the problem that was created here in Bothell. So those kind of issues.
So let me ask real quick, Public Works Director, are you ready to entertain or to have a conversation tonight? I know you were going to work on a letter, and you're not. I know that's not ready for tonight.
We could certainly have the discussion, and we can go with council direction. I haven't drafted a letter at this point.
I guess, are you prepared to provide at least a little bit of discussion for us to understand?
Certainly.
The staff perspective? Okay, great. So I don't have a problem adding that to the agenda. Does anybody else? Do you have any other changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none. All right, so nothing's been pulled from the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
There we go. So moved by Councilmember Agnew, second by Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Dewar. We have to use our hands. We don't have the voting buttons. So all those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We're on to study session number 1, AB 16-118, study session update regarding class and compensation study. And we have our Human Resources Director here to provide a presentation.
Right. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Dean Perez, Human Resources. I'm here to introduce Kate Tilzer. Some of you were here in February when we first introduced her as our consultant that's conducting our comprehensive classification and compensation study. So when Kate was here in February, she went through the process that we were going to undertake. It's about an 8-month process. In February, so in March through May, she's gone through phase 1 of the process. There's 4 phases. So she's going to talk about, in her presentation, what she's done and what the next steps are. Certainly, your council will be out on recess in August, but the plan is to take her information, work it into our budget process so that when council comes back from recess, we're ready to talk about the nuts and bolts of the class and compensation study. But I'd like to introduce Kay and have her take over a brief presentation, and then we'd be prepared to answer questions.
Thank you, Dean. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kate Tilzer with Public Sector Personnel Consultants, and I am here to talk about here. Okay, figuring out how to advance slides here. Just to give you an update on where we are with this classification and compensation study and answer any questions you might have. So we have, the study components would be to review and update the job titles and job descriptions for the AFSCME and the management professional or the non-represented positions, and then conduct a total compensation study. So that would be base salary plus benefits, so we can get a picture of what the compensation that the city is offering, what it is as a total package, and how it relates to the market. So the survey criteria and factors, when we look at who we compare the jobs to in the marketplace, one of the primary things that we're going to consider is where does a city get its employees from? Where does it lose its employees to? So where's the competition out there? So we wanted to make sure that we are considering any of those other cities or employers that might steal employees away from the city, or where you, to use the term loosely, steal employees from. So where are they coming from? Where are they going to? So the focus would be on that, finding those other employers that have jobs similar to the city, not necessarily comparing the city of Bothell to those other employers, because they may not look alike. They may be they're more than likely very different, but they may have some common job classes there, in which case we want to survey that market and find out where that competition lies and what is it paying. So it is the jobs that we're studying, not the cities or the comparator agencies. So phase one is getting to know the jobs. So we want to make sure that we have documented the content for the jobs. And so we did that through position analysis questionnaires, or PAQs, that were completed by each of the employees. Managers reviewed those PAQs. And then PSBC, our consultants, came out and met with employees and did phone interviews. So on-site interviews and phone interviews. There was a few employees and directors that weren't available when we were on site. So we did some catch-up work with them. So that we can take a look at what might have changed since the last time a study such as this was done. So any changes to the job content, or any title changes that might be necessary based upon different duties and responsibilities, or changes in complexity. We're looking at analyzing those and then getting to know what jobs the city has, so that we can intelligently look for those comparator jobs out in the marketplace. So we're getting ready to get into the heart of phase two. We have been collecting the salary plans and benefit data from the comparator employers. However, we're just now finalizing the classification, so we don't want to start collecting market data until we know for certain that we have those jobs documented correctly and we understand that job content. So that's the review that's going on today and tomorrow, as I'm meeting with the directors to review our findings and make sure we've got it right. Once we've identified that we've got it right, then we'll begin extracting that market data, looking at the job content for each of the city's job classes, and then trying to find those comparable jobs in the marketplace. So we're focusing on the actual job content, not just title matching. So once we have all that market data collected, then that's what begin analyzing that market to find out where is the city in relation to this competitive marketplace. So at that point, we'll be collecting that data and then analyzing it to determine where does the city fall short of its desired competitiveness policy, so that we can talk about, once we have that data, where does the city want to be in relation to that competitive marketplace. So there'll be some conversations about that. So during phase three, we'll be looking at, here's the market data, what does this mean to the city? Do we want to be at, do we want to be behind the market, ahead of the market? And looking at things like the base salary offerings as well as the benefit offerings, so that total compensation picture. Phase four then, which would be upcoming, would be once we've identified the placement or the desired competitiveness policy for the city, what's it going to cost the city to get there? So that will be part of the study, is determining what's the estimate, working with the labor and the management groups in order to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to review it, provide input and feedback, and then making sure, of course, that we are executing the city's desired strategy in terms of employment and salary compensation, as well as making sure that it's financially affordable. Study timeline. I know this is a very tiny picture, but I believe you have a printout up there, just kind of give you an idea of what the project timeline looks like. There are some things that are going on concurrently, so it's not a linear process. We've got a number of things, communication that is going on during the entire project, as well as some of the phases of the project, if you will. So there's details there that show what the project timeline is. So we are about item 4, I believe, task number 4. It's hard for me to read that, but task number 4 is where we're about currently. Employer And the agencies use, the other employers and the agencies use for the market comparison, there's not a slide there, but I think you have that in front of you. These are the comparators that were used during the last salary survey. We have had a little bit of a discussion about whether or not these are still relevant comparators in the marketplace. I believe the consensus so far is that yes, this is our relevant marketplace competitors. And so this will, unless there's any feedback, otherwise, this will be the group that we're looking at, trying to find those comparable jobs that match the city's content. So any questions on the process or the project that I can be of assistance with?
So are you all done with your presentation?
Yeah, I think that's, unless you
Okay.
have questions, I think that's the end of the slide there, yep.
Okay, great. Questions from council? Councilmember Samberg?
So you mentioned that you're studying comparable jobs in the marketplace. You're looking for comparable jobs, not just comparator cities.
Correct. Yeah, our goal would be to compare what's the market value for those jobs that are like the city of Bothell's jobs. So we'll be looking at who employs jobs such as finance director or the 911 dispatchers, the police support officers, animal control officers. So our goal is to find who's employing those occupations and what do they pay for them.
So we might not have like positions in the private sector for police, but for, I would imagine for a lot of our administrative positions, we would have comparable positions to compare to in the private sector. And so is there a reason why we're not looking at the private sector?
Well, we can certainly look at the private sector because you're correct. There are some jobs at the city that you are competing with private sector employers for those occupations. The difficulty in including private sector is that our resource for collecting information is primarily going to be published survey information. To contact the private sector employers directly and ask for them to share that information, we're usually not real successful on a one-on-one level in getting private sector employers to participate. We have tried that in the past and had some modest success by trying to entice them through a custom questionnaire with very specific information that they then fill in salary ranges. But to ask them carte blanche for their salary plans, we usually don't even get a response. So published survey data is what we would use, and we can certainly include that in this study if the city deems that that is useful information in there. So for those jobs where there is a private sector competitor in the marketplace, we can certainly get that prevailing rate information from those published survey sources.
The reason why I asked that is a couple years ago, the Seattle Times did a series on public employee compensation, and the prevailing thought was that public employees had lower salaries but better benefits. And their analysis showed that more recently, salaries in the public sector are as good, if not better in some cases, in the private sector, and still the benefits are that much better. And so I'd also asked a question about, do your comparisons include the total compensation package, not just salary, but salary and benefits?
Yes, we would be comparing, that would be our goal, to look at the total compensation. So base salary, and typically we would analyze base salary on its own. Then we would look at the individual benefit components to see, are there any huge variances between those individual benefits, and then the total package. Many times you might be low in a base offering, but with generous benefits, when you look at the total compensation, they offset each other. So we want to watch for some of those things where if you're just looking at base salary, it doesn't give you the full picture. And again, private sector, that kind of data is difficult to dig out of the private sector. So where we can obtain it, we would be happy to include that. I think it is useful information. But when we're looking at a market model group with as many public sector employers, usually the impact of including the private sector or not including them it's pretty minimal. So it's pretty anticlimactic whether we include them or not. But that would be our goal, is to get as much information as possible so that we can analyze base salaries, benefits, and then that total compensation. That way it gives you the full picture of where you're competitive and where you're not.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? So I have a quick question. Will you go back to slide 6, I think it is there? Okay.
That one?
Yeah, so for phase 3, so I was thinking about, okay, so we make a policy statement about where we want to be in competitiveness, but we don't have any financials to back it up because that happens in phase 4. So I guess my question is, are we going to have any financial information when we're trying to establish the policy in phase 3? Or is it just kind of, because then it said later in the schedule that information will be presented to us later.
Yes, we will have some, because we'll have to make some decision points. So what we'll usually do is start with a couple scenarios to say, assuming that the city wants to compete at the prevailing midpoint or the 50th percentile or 100% of the market, however you want to phrase it, then we'll start to run some estimates to say, assuming that this is your desired policy, this is the cost. And then look at that. So there's a couple of things that most of our clients would need to decide. Would be short range, can we afford it, but is that our long range goal? So a lot of our clients will start off, especially just coming out of this economic downturn, saying we really want to be at 105% of the market, but we can't afford to this year, so we're going to have a multi-year strategy to get there. So there's some decision factors about where the city desires to be, and then we'll run some fiscal impact scenarios so that, yes, there can be some decision points about, well, gosh, that's where we want to be, but we're just never going to be able to afford it. So you're absolutely correct. It's sort of a cyclical process of looking at the fiscal impact, then deciding if it's affordable, and then looking at the fiscal impact.
Okay, good. So that will take place, all right? That's what I was worried
Yes, absolutely.
about. I think that's it.
Okay.
We're quiet tonight.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
nice to be with you tonight.
We'll see you soon. All right, moving right along. AB 16-119, study session, status update regarding the Community Conversation Outreach Program, and Barbara Ramey, our communications officer, is going to provide a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here today. It's kind of exciting to be here for a second time in a matter of a month or so, and earlier this evening for me, so that's great. I am here to talk to you about community conversations, and you might wonder, what are community conversations? Well, it's a public engagement program in response to a council request that council made at the retreat in 2015, and it's one of many ways that the city does outreach with the public, but it's a new program, so I'm here to give you a status update. 2 colleagues and I participated in a training last fall, how to develop and implement this program. It was one of the best trainings that I've actually ever been to in a long time. It was sponsored by the Seattle Foundation and King County, and it was put on by the Harwood Institute. The Harwood Institute's model is to elicit public knowledge. And what that means is it's basically subjective information versus statistical information. The city already has surveys. We do a periodic statistical survey. We gather information from other sources. But this was a more of a listening tour. So I'm going to be talking more tonight than I did in any of these meetings. So that's one thing to really emphasize, is that these meetings were not about staff going out and talking about what the city's doing. They were about listening. The turned outward approach was tested by the Harwood Institute over a period of 25 years. And I have a little sign here, am I turned outward today? And I keep this sign in my cube to remind me what I learned at this training. And it was a 2.5-day training, so in 10 minutes I can't explain fully what it means, but there's something in your desk, in the folder that you have, about am I turned outward? And I'm hoping that maybe sometime later tonight you can take a few minutes to find out if you're turned outward. And if you're not, it can help you think about ways that you can be turned outward. So before I get too far into this presentation, I wanted to ask folks who are here tonight who participated if you wouldn't mind standing up. Thank you so much for being a part of our community conversations. It's really all about you. It's not about me. It's not about the city. It's about what we heard from you. So I wanted to mention there's 7 different groups that we went out to, and these were by invitation only. We met with folks that are involved in business, clergy, human services, the PTA, senior citizens, social media administrators, and what those people are, they're volunteers that run Facebook accounts in the community to share information about what's going on. And then youth. The youth were UW students who live on campus here in Bothell. So we went out to each of these 7 groups for about 2 hours each with a series of 10 questions. We used the same 10 questions at each of the 7 meetings, and the questions were designed to get at what people want Bothell to be like, what their hopes and dreams are for Bothell. And there's no way I can really express to you how exciting these meetings were. But people participated fully with their heart and soul, and I walked out of the meetings that I did just thinking, wow, our community really cares about Bothell. They want to make Bothell a better place, and this was a really valuable effort. So I would like to introduce my facilitators that helped, as well as the co-facilitators. If you are a facilitator, actually I want to start with Sabrina and Janet. Could you two stand up? Sabrina Combs and Janet Gear went with me to the training, and the picture that you see is us being kind of goofy, but we were really excited at the training. I could not have done this without Sabrina and Janet. They helped me together, basically as a group. We figured out how we were going to implement this thing, how we were going to take the learnings from a 2.5-day training and make it real. So thank you so much. Also, we had 3 co-facilitators. Each of the facilitators was paired with a co-facilitator, and at least 2 of them are here tonight. Maureen and Henry, would you mind standing up? Or at least Henry was here. Well, maybe he left. Anyway, Maureen's here, and Kirsten had to teach a CPR class, so she wasn't able to be here tonight. Also, I'd like to thank our note takers, at least one of whom is here tonight. Radhika, would you mind standing up? Thank you. We also had Maureen Carlson, Kim Doe, Lisa Eckert, Jenny Merritt, Linda Quinn, and Virginia Samuelson. So another thing I want to emphasize is this was really a citywide effort. There were folks here on staff from Public Works, from Fire and EMS, from Finance, from Police. So this was definitely a citywide effort. So what we learned is encapsulated here in one of Bob Jean's favorite visual tools, a Wordle. And what you see here, the words that are bigger are words that we heard repeatedly. So community stands out the biggest. You also see affordable, people, walk, sidewalk, options, housing. These are just a few of the things that we heard, but it kind of encapsulates most of the important themes that came out. So how these meetings actually worked, where we had note takers who took notes. Usually we had 2 note takers per meeting, and they helped each other ensure accuracy. After each of the 7 meetings, Janet and Sabrina and I met. We went through all the notes and we looked for themes. So I'm going to share a little bit more about what we learned. One of the questions that we asked is, what type of community do you want Bothell to be? And some of the key things that we heard were affordability, communication, community identity and diversity, events and venues, focus on the entire city, growth and development, and there that basically means more planning for growth and development, and transportation. And there's a lot more detail in here, and I hope you'll read the 10-page report that was in your packet, because there's really not time for me to get into the nitty-gritty of each of these. But the other thing I wanted to mention is what we as a city are doing already, and then what we know that we want to do, what we want to do better at. So the city's already doing a lot to address some of the themes that we heard. For example, on communication, as you know, we just launched the redesigned website. We're working with community partners on events such as the Beer Fest, and the downtown revitalization is well underway. But there are things that we can do better. Some examples are affordable housing, bring back more events to connect neighborhoods. People miss traditions like Riverfest and the live arts events. And we need to do a little bit more balance, focusing on the entire city, not just the downtown. We also can improve communication and coordination between developers, the school district, and the city. We heard that a lot. People basically said, the city is really growing. How come the school district doesn't seem to know what development is happening so that they can plan to build enough schools? So the city is working on improving that communication with the school district. On transportation, we are working with transit providers to improve local and regional transportation. We're working to improve streets and sidewalks, and we've got a parking committee that is working. Again, there's more details in your report. But where do we go from here? Where do we go with all of this information that we gathered? The Harwood Institute approach recommends that we focus on shared goals, or what they call the sweet spot. And this is just a very simple graphic to kind of illustrate that the community might have this bucket of needs, the city has this bucket of things that they have in mind that they want to do, and the sweet spot are where those two intersect. There's many cases where the city and the community want the same things, and in many cases they might be willing to work together on partnerships to achieve shared goals. And this was really apparent in many of the community conversations that I was in. The folks that were at those meetings were eager to get started, and what can we do, and how can we help? So the sweet spot. Janet and Sabrina and I, when we were trying to sort through all this, we divided this into 3 categories. And the first category we're calling the sweet spot in action, or what I like to call quick wins. These are things that staff can do quickly without asking for more budget or resources. For example, based on information gleaned from community conversations, we're already trying some new things, such as attending more events at the North Shore Senior Center, including Pi Day. Do you know what Pi Day is? You guys heard of Pi Day? For those in the audience who might not know what Pi Day is, the Senior Center every Tuesday around lunchtime serves home-baked pie that they just made fresh that morning. And so one day, staff from the Public Works Department and I set up a table about the streets and sidewalks ballot measure outside of Pi Day so people could get their pie and then stop by and ask questions. The second category we're calling the sweet spot for council consideration. And these are basically things that would take council direction or more revenue, things like partnering with community organizations to bring back Riverfest. And I have here 2 hiring bullets, hiring a customer service desk manager and hiring a neighborhood services liaison. And I want to point out that that might not be exactly the answer to the problem. As Bob Jean pointed out to me, there's ways that you can reassign staff, you can look at who does what. So my point here is that there are things that we can do to improve customer service at the front desk, and also to improve services and coordination with neighborhoods. The last bullet there is exploring partnerships with community organizations to take actions. So the last area we're calling the sweet spot with voter approval. One thing we heard a lot in our meetings with the community was a call for improved transportation and sidewalks. The city's Safe Streets and Sidewalks ballot measure is a proposal that would meet the community's needs, voiced both through this process and in other venues. It's a goal shared by the community and the city and would require voter approval this fall. So the next steps, we're working to schedule follow-up meetings with each of the 7 groups in September, and Bob Jean will be joining us to meet folks and talk a little bit more about what the city is doing. We're going to be focusing on, as staff, on the sweet spot in action, which is the things we know that we can just go out and do, and working on the sweet spot with voter approval. And I would love to entertain any questions that you might have or input on where you think we should go with this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any questions from council? Come on, Councilmember Samberg, I know you want to. Somebody else want to go first? There we go. Councilmember Spivey.
Great, thank you. So, excuse me, Barbara, I know we have growth in the city and it's happening.
Yes.
And I've heard several times about growth and the communication with the school district on where that growth is happening. There is a misconception on what growth is in the city and what growth is outside the city. A lot of people think everything on 39th is in the city limits, and it's not. and they're, they're, because it's a Bothell mailing address, they're saying, Bothell's got all this growth, they should be, and what are we doing to communicate what is exactly growth in the city and growth outside the city to address some of these concerns that maybe Snohomish County, because they're doing the permitting, could do a better job of?
Well,
I'm not saying that we shouldn't do a better job,
Right.
but we've got partners in that should maybe be doing a better job as well, so people understand.
Right, that's a good question. And I manage the city's Facebook account and Twitter account, and a lot of times I get questions on social media about things that are outside the city limits. And so on a case-by-case basis, I'm responding to those and saying, well, XYZ project or street or problem or whatever is actually in Snohomish County, and you need to contact them. But growth is it's a regional issue. And that I'm basically just reporting back what we heard. So any ideas you have for messaging, that I would welcome that.
Yeah, it's obviously a concern, but we want to be addressing, I don't want to be trying to fix Snohomish County's problems at the same time that we're fixing ours, is
Right,
what I'm saying. So,
right.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
So we met with the school district earlier this year, and we had a very specific conversation with them about communication, and it sounded to me as though we could do a better job, and I wondered, maybe community development could answer this question, but if we followed up on any of the kind of suggestions or things that we talked about in notifying them earlier as far as growth.
With the school district?
Yes.
Well, I think we are quite engaged with them now. We do meet with the school district twice a year, and we go over what the city's ongoing forecast is for population and growth. If that needs to be stepped up in some way, we're happy to do that, but I didn't come away from that discussion with a task to work on that.
Okay. Maybe I need to rewatch the video, but I thought there was a specific conversation about things that we could do to notify them sooner.
I mean, they are on our list with the Imagine Bothell plan. We do, every time we put out a monthly agenda for the Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan and other amendments that go to the Planning Commission. They are on the list for that. So if that was the issue, that has been accomplished.
Okay. So when you say you meet twice a year, the community development meets twice a year with the school district?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. So my other comment was, I love that everyone wants Riverfest back because I want Riverfest back. Can you tell me, are we making concrete steps to make that happen?
Well, I can tell you, I staff the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, and it has come up for discussion there. And our Parks Director, John Keates, came to the LTAC, I'm trying to remember when it was, several months ago, asking if LTAC would be interested in entertaining a proposal to bring Riverfest back. So I think there's discussions going on. We know we need to kind of research more about why did it stop, because I understand that was for budget reasons. So there's definitely conversation going on. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that you were going to come back to LTAC later this fall. He's nodding. So yes, our Parks Director will be bringing a proposal to the LTAC committee in the fall.
That's great, because I know people like beer, but I'm not a beer person. I want
Yeah,
others to go to-
I'm not a beer person either. Apologies to Peter, but just in talking with people, I think a lot of people would be interested in bringing Riverfest back. It's just a matter of resources and, what's appropriate for the LTAC to fund. So we've got a little bit more research to do, but there are discussions going on.
Great, and I actually was quite heartened reading some of the things that people were asking for, because I feel like we've made progress in that direction, particularly with the Streets and Sidewalks levy. And I would say as a council member, the suggestions about us participating or going to community meetings, I think just invite us. I go to 80%, 90% of what I'm invited to. So if you want us there, send us an email.
That's great, and hopefully everybody watching this is hearing that too.
Thank you.
Councilmember Samberg?
I just wanted to echo what Deputy Mayor Dewar said about community events. We've heard a lot about the desire to bring back more community events even before this study, and I think this study is really valuable and just validates that. Riverfest was always popular. The tree lighting ceremony on Main Street last year, which was the first time it was done in years, was wildly popular despite the horrible weather. So, the community really is desiring those things. And I think in this budget cycle, if we can talk about either, LTAC revenues and or operating budget revenues to bring towards those recreation and community events, I think that's great. We were doing a lot of positive things, and you noted that in the report, but there were also a lot of areas for improvement. So I hope that you will feel comfortable coming to council or individually or whatever and giving us suggestions on how we can improve. I mean, we're doing some things better with communication, like website, but when you listed those 3 sweet spot goals, council was involved just in actions that might require budget considerations, and I think there are other quick actions that we can do, just like you mentioned in number 1, that to address some of those shortcomings that were identified in the report. So I hope you feel free to let council know about that, because
Great.
your experience in those workshops is far richer than the 10-page report that you have for us. And then you said that you were going to do a follow-up in September. Is it going to be the same folks? Are you going to expand anymore and listen to more people?
Well, our plan at this point is to come back to the same people, because they're the people that did the original conversations, and some of them are here tonight, but we want to go back to those same people and say, here's what we heard from you, here's, our report, here's what we said to council, and then bring back, what we heard from council, as well as Bob Jean is going to let them know a little bit more about the streets and sidewalks ballot measure.
And then are we going to maybe do this listening tour like every other year now that we have staff so wonderfully trained on the Harwood Institute?
Well, that's certainly something we could consider. We were our goal was to get through this first session, I guess, and see where we go from it, and then make sure that we can actually take some actions. But yeah, I think the community that participated, people that participated, really liked it. And from a staff perspective, I think it was really valuable. So if workload and staffing allow, I think it would be great to do periodically.
Well, thanks to staff for finding time in their workload to do this, and thanks to the public who took time out of their busy schedules to give us feedback. I appreciate it.
Councilmember McNeal?
Yes, I just wanted to echo what Deputy Mayor Dewar and Councilmember Samberg said about the importance of having community events. Is there a way that some of the community groups that we currently have can reach out, or what way would they reach out to you, like on the Riverfest or the Live Arts? What's the best way to get some of these groups involved with you?
Well, I guess on Riverfest, John Keates, our Parks Director, like I mentioned, is planning to come back in the fall to ask LTAC if they would support it. So the Parks Department may be the one that's trying to figure out how to do it. So I would suggest that, he's not here. Well, when you leave, you get things assigned to you. I was going to say that probably contacting John Keates would be the best, but they could contact me as well, and I could put them in touch with John.
Okay, so it'd be great to kind of get those groups involved, and maybe they can do a partnership with you on some of these events? Okay, great, thank you.
No?
Thank you, John, for volunteering for that, by the way.
He's back.
I'll fill you in later, sorry.
So you mentioned in your presentation that the September meeting that you were going to go over the sweet spots for voter approval and the sweet spot for the sweet spot in action, I guess, the quick wins. Could you add to it the leadership portion to that meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to clarify, in September, we're going to go back with what we heard. So we're going to go back with all of it, basically, and report to people what we heard from them, what we're planning to do, what we're already doing with all of it.
Because I'd be interested in doing some of these things that were basically identified for us to work on in the leadership vision and direction section. As soon as you guys are ready to set it up, like the deputy mayor said, just point us in the right direction and we can go to those things. And it's usually we don't know they're occurring or they want us there.
And I guess the other thing to explain is that when we went to the Harwood Institute training, they basically said that when you do these community conversations, they should be done at a staff level, at least initially, not with elected officials or city managers, basically people like us at the lower level who, we're not empowered so much to say, oh, yes, we could spend X million on such and such. So it's easier for us to just listen. So that's why we didn't involve council earlier in the process, just so you kind of know how it works.
Okay. I think that was it. Thank you. This is really helpful. I really enjoyed all the information in here. It was very, some of it was painful, but a lot of it was really useful and encouraging that we're heading in the right direction and people are generally happy with our community. So.
Yeah, I think so. Well, great. Thanks so much. And again, I just wanted to mention to the folks who participated in the community conversations, thanks for being here. And I have a stack of the reports on the table where I'm sitting if you want to pick one up later. Thanks.
Interim City Manager, you had some comments?
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, and leave that up if you would, Barbara.
Okay.
There's the old Chinese saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you go back to my Wordle, in this case, 1,000 words becomes a picture. And it's one of the reasons I really like this way of summarizing. But this really wasn't just a summary of what came out of the community conversations. It's really remarkably, I've been doing a lot of listening over the last couple of weeks. And I've been hearing, what people were saying through our finance workshops on what's important as we start to build the budget. Discussions that Parks and Recs have been having out in the community on open space issues and options. The community survey that we do. The focus groups essentially that you folks helped with really summarized quite well all this other feedback that we've been getting. And one of my jobs is going to be this weekend, frankly, to try to bring that to a head a little bit with council and to, amongst all of these many issues, try to focus on those key items that are going to drive the budget. Lesser items will kind of become back burner items in the budget. But the priority items that are being identified out of this process and the other listening processes the city's been undertaking, they are definitely going to shape the budget I proposed to you this fall. It will be built around these inputs, and we'll be looking at how to balance the budget issues, the financial issues, to accomplish those goals. So this is very much an active listening exercise. As Barbara and I talked about it, it's sort of like you talked, we listened. And we need to do more of that. And I think Bothell's getting better at it. And hopefully we'll be able to reflect that with this budget document as well, that it's really a partnership with the community. And then at some point, council's got to strike the right balance. And that's where it gets a little tougher again, because then you have to make choices. But I think with the benefit of this input, we'll make better choices. So that was the context I wanted to, it wasn't just this part, it's really kind of a collective effort that's leading to that picture. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Excellent comments. Thank you, Ms. Ramey. So we are on to AB 16-120, which is a study session regarding the Wayne Golf Course visioning process. And we have John Keates, the park director, to kick us off.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. John Keates, Parks and Recreation Director, and we are here to provide you with an overview tonight of our Wayne Golf Course visioning work. And just by way of reference, this is what we have planned for the presentation. Project introduction, we'll give you some feedback from the public meetings we've had, online survey results, preliminary vision plan results, update on some funding requests, and then turn the program over to council for discussion and questions. First of all, I want to introduce some folks because this has been a partnership with 4 entities working on this project so far. One Bothell, King County Parks, Forterra, and the City of Bothell. And tonight we have John T. Barnes, Bob Burns, and Michelle Connor here representing One Bothell, King County Parks, and Forterra. And I think to kick things off, I think John T. and Michelle want to address council first. And Bob said he'd just be here today for or tonight for questions. And then, of course, we have our landscape architect who's worked with us through this process, Jim Brennan. So, John T.
Thank you, John. Council. I'm John T. Barnes. I'm from One Bothell. It's actually a privilege to be part of this process. John Keates, city staff, council members, King County and Forterra have been working really well together. Informed by the expertise of Jim Brennan and his team. Personally, I have to tell you, it's been a great experience. And, such a functional team and so much engagement from the community as well. It's great to see such active participation in all of the vision process so far. It's also great that we're here today because we want to save one of the largest undeveloped sites along the Sammamish River for a public park. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create an iconic park for the booming population of Bothell as we grow, both as a recreational corridor connecting the Burt-Gilman, Sammamish River and Tolt pipeline trails, and 130 acres of green space when combined with Blythe. One Bothell is here today to represent views of the public that we have connected with over 2,500 of our own supporters and the survey of over 1,000 people who provided input through J.A. Brennan's visioning process. We know the community is looking for a special place for recreation, education, and the protection of native fish and wildlife species. The process of grants to fund the purchase of the land is complicated, but very encouragingly confident. Grants can afford the city acquisition of the land, but we can create restrictions which limit recreation activities. The big decision the city needs to make now is how much land they will fund as unrestricted property, so they can activate the land with structures like picnic shelters, public restrooms, gardens, play or exercise structures, community buildings, and very importantly, public parking. What the city chooses not to fund will be shared with wildlife through trails and other approved uses using funds from outside the city. One Bothell believes any plan should include a building on the front line that will draw people to the park, whether arriving by bicycle along the Burt-Gilman Trail, the bus rapid transit along Bothell Way, by river or by car. Reserving unrestricted land for a building affords the city opportunity to generate revenue to maintain the property, whether providing food services, sports activities, retail space, a place to share cultures of our region, the history of the area, or education facilities on salmon recovery, or even labs for hands-on learning by local students partnering with local schools and university. We also have an amazing opportunity with Wayne. There's enough land to allow for the majority of activities outlined in the city's survey. We don't have to be selective, while still being in harmony with the river and the local wildlife. If and only if we reserve enough land that's unrestricted to give the community access points and further reasons to come to the park. We believe we need to reserve 2.5 acres on the front and between 2 and 4 on the back 9 to best accomplish this. That's less than 10% of the property, and respects the city's needs to support much needed parks in other areas of Bothell, which I'm sure you're thinking about. We're excited to be part of the conversation as the city makes their recommendation. We will continue to support grant applications with the city, Forterra, King County, and the state of Washington so that we can save the land for the public and support the needs of the community. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's really makes me happy to be here on this occasion. Forterra stepped in to secure this property because we wanted to give the community a chance to decide its future. And it's such an honor to be here. And Joshua, thank you for working with us to make this possible. Forterra's point of view, which I've discussed with our board of directors and our president, Jean Duvernoy, is that land provides you with flexibility as a city. Securing this property allows you to be resilient. You're doing a tremendous job building a dense and vibrant downtown, having open space nearby that can be restored for habitat and recreational purposes is a tremendous value. But it also presents an opportunity to create flexibility. And the decisions that you make about reserving some of the property for other potential uses, some of which you may be able to define now today, some of which you may not know today, but might need to decide in the future, it gives you that option. So you've got a lot of things to weigh in terms of the choices and the costs, but our board certainly encourages you to retain some flexibility in the use of the property so that you can activate it for the community, so that you can adapt the property over time. The future councils can adapt it over time for a host of different purposes that can enrich and enliven the city and the region for the benefit of all. So thank you for that opportunity. I encourage you to, be bold with your vision, and we'll be here to support you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll just turn the floor over to Jim Brennan, who worked with our group to complete the visioning process. Jim.
Thank you, John. Well, it's really been an honor to work with you all in the community and all the stakeholder groups on this project. It's really a dream property and project and such an amazing opportunity. J. Brennan Associates has a team that includes makers, architects, and planners, and Tetra Tech. On our team from Tetra Tech, Mary Martz actually was at the Corps of Engineers and did the original Sammamish River plan and some of the restoration documents, and has remained really active, so we've really had some great team input from our science team. Also at J.A. Brennan Associates, we focus on public involvement and development of public park spaces that involve restoration balanced with public access. So it's really an exciting project. This is the context of the park, and it shows the front 9 here just to get everybody oriented, and the back 9. This is Blythe Park. That's something that we heard throughout the public process, was the importance of really looking at this site in context of the greater Bothell community. Park at Bothell Landing is right here. People talked about how the parking lot and the restroom in Blythe Park is really part of this too. We talked a lot about the fact that those parks like Bothell Landing and Blythe are very crowded and very popular. So there is a need for more recreational opportunities, but they all need to be linked together and functioning as one. So in our process, we work to capture your ideas, the ideas of the committee and the community and stakeholders throughout the process to really work in a transparent way where all ideas were brought to the table. And I know that was something that was really important to the city. And so we had these really open meetings and had lots of input, lots of enthusiasm from the community, a lot of great ideas that really fueled the visioning process. We also talked a lot about it's not a done deal yet. There still needs to be money raised to make this project happen. And so really working to capitalize on the opportunities before it's too late and really see the value and explore that with the community. So what will the legacy be in the next 100 years? How will this relate? Bothell's doing a lot of amazing things, but what will happen in the future? Will the salmon still be swimming in Sammamish River? There's a lot of issues that face the ecological and environmental qualities of the Sammamish River and the surrounding area in the Northwest. We want to create a healthy community. Through the public meeting process, we had 2 public meetings, and we also had a stakeholder meeting, which was really informative. Throughout the process, I think we had over 100 people attend those meetings, so it was very well attended on some beautiful evenings. Out of our stakeholder meeting, we had this Wordle developed and really started gleaning these ideas, like what is your vision for this place, and started collecting those ideas and documenting that. We also have a vision plan that's available to you to help inform your decisions moving ahead. During the first public meeting, we looked at the goals. We did this instant response technology, and some of you were there, but it was a chance for the attendees at the meeting to give instant feedback to what they thought was important. I mean, this all happened in a very short period of time. I think we only had about 3 months, so we were moving quickly, and getting that instant feedback really helped us move in the right direction. Things that really came to the top for goals was the ecological restoration, the stewardship of the river, and making those connections to the community and the surrounding open space. We also asked people to rate what the features and uses that they would like to see, and we had a long list of different potential uses, and 5 was extremely important and 0 was something not to include. So we got a lot of great feedback, and you can see an example here is the connections to regional trails and greenway system. We also then followed up with an online survey, and for that we received over 1,000 responses, which that's a record for me doing a lot of public involvement. That was just an amazing turnout from the community. Hopefully some of you saw the survey that was online. And we had many of the same questions that we had at public meeting number 1. We talked about the uses and activities that people would like to see in the park, and just documenting some of the examples. We talked about the goals as well. Here you can see the restroom was one of the highest ranked features, which makes sense. Everybody wants to have a restroom in the park, but things like parking lot, and you can see the list here, but there was no real surprises. I think the thing that we learned here was that fairly passive things that related to the river and the natural kind of setting that the Wayne Golf Course has was really what rose to the top. But yeah, people do want to have some recreational activities out there. And of course, you know, we talked a lot during the process that, you know, there's more to come. This is a vision plan. Eventually there would be a master plan, and, you know, a decision isn't necessarily needed at this time on exactly what uses and activities would happen there, but really the bigger picture idea is how does the vision plan inform the grant process that's moving ahead at a fast clip. So we kept coming back to this context thing, looking at how the Burke-Gilman Trail comes into the front 9 and really offers a great gateway here. We talked about the connection to Park at Bothell Landing and what are the activities that take place there, what do other parks within Bothell provide, you know, and really thinking about moving ahead, what design eventually happens here should be something that's most needed by the community. So after we had all of that input, we created a vision plan. Along the way, we actually had several alternatives, took a lot of input, and came up with a preferred plan. And things that we were doing in our process was really looking for ways to balance costs, especially to the local community, as Jonty mentioned, with restrictions that might come with some of the grants. Hearing from the community what they would like to see out there. You know, and thinking as we move ahead with the Wayne Golf Course project, even vegetation management can change that landscape dramatically. If you just simply stop mowing the lawn of the golf course, you know, the growth of native and invasive species is going to happen. So there's like landscape management, a successional environment where some areas are going to be reforested. It could be Scotch broom and blackberries, or there could be restoration, and it could be a really rich patchwork of native plant communities. Along the way, we wanted to explore what are some of the possibilities of these uses that may be more intensive, because that really informs the grant process. We talked about some good case studies. Mercer Slough is something that's in a Bellevue Park, but it's managed and operated by the Seattle Science Center. And it's an interesting facility. It has some classrooms. It has some gathering areas. It has a parking lot. You know, could something like that be included in the Wayne Golf Course site? Or the Washington Park Arboretum. It's a relatively small environmental education again, plant education. It has a small parking lot gathering area. It's rented out for a lot of events, such as weddings or meetings. It has an outdoor gathering area. You know, we thought that would be really informative to look at how a facility like this, how would that fit in on the Wayne Golf Course? And of course, there would be more to come in a master planning phase, but we looked at just kind of the anatomy of this. There's a building, an outdoor gathering area, a parking lot for about 40 cars, and it all fits within about 1.3 acres. And that would is one way to start looking at that decision of how much land do you want to reserve for future development. So from that analysis, we developed a draft concept plan, and the color coding we have here is, as you can see, it's very general. The yellow is activity zones, the gateway. This is where you welcome people into the Wayne Golf Course site. The green represents either forest or riparian vegetation restoration. Those are the softer areas that really could happen within any kind of grant scenario. We talked about how there could be an entry zone on the front 9, one on the back 9. It seems very feasible to do that. And we also talked about the importance of some kind of really great connection between the front and back 9. The other thing that came up from a circulation standpoint was really capturing people from the Burke-Gilman Trail here on the front 9. And at one point, we talked about the importance of the connection to the Tolt River Pipeline Trail. And at one point we had that coming through the Wayne Golf Course, but somebody gave us this input that we should consider using the existing bridge and bring that connection through Blythe Park. And that was that idea of really looking at this holistically, not having that boundary line between the two parks be an issue. And that made a lot of sense. We also talked about having loop trails that would radiate from those access points. And it would be nice to have loops for different people of different ability, accessible loops. You know, maybe there's a really short stroll right out of a parking lot area, but gets you down to the river. Maybe there's a hand carry boat launch. There may be an intermediate size loop and then a larger loop. Well, the orange trails really represent the pedestrian circulation, and the arrows are viewpoints. And in a good park design, you want to provide some access and viewpoints to the water, like the river or a wetland, or to watchable wildlife opportunities. Same kind of thing could happen on the back 9, where you have some loops developed and some options. There's a lot of steep terrain up in this area, but there's really already some great trail systems up there, and just augment those with some additional connections and opportunities. There's also the restoration component. It's about a half a mile of the Sammamish River, and looking at ways to expand the floodplain to create fringe wetlands. That allows us also to plant trees, which is really important to the fish habitat. We want to shade the water, keep it cool, also provide the food, the insects, and detritus coming out of the trees really fuel that system. To do that, we need to make sure we're okay with the flood conveyance, so laying those slope back, that all gives us wetlands, but it gives us added flood storage and allows us to do some of that planting. We also talked about that connection to Blythe Park, welcoming people in here. This area is welcoming in here as well. So creating that wonderful network of trails and a way to really explore this diverse and amazing site. We looked at the river flood. This is just a cross-section that kind of shows the floodplain of the Sammamish River, and that idea, you know, maybe the existing slope is right about here. We could do some excavation and mound up some areas, creating a viewing opportunity, but you can see that expanded flood storage in these areas here. So as we get into looking at the options and the idea of the restrictions that come along with the grants, we developed this table that really shows on the left-hand side uses that might be restricted. And most of the grant restrictions really involve limiting impervious surfaces. So parking may be difficult. A recreation or community building may be difficult. Paved paths, sports courts, those are just a few examples. You know, maybe a recreation field technically isn't impervious, but it could be an issue moving ahead when you go to get a development grant or you try to get a habitat restoration grant for implementation. There could be issues that come up there too, because well, we would fund your restoration project, except it's right next to a big sports field, so there's some complex kind of interactions that will come out of this moving ahead, and that's why the recreation field is on the left-hand side, but it's not all black and white. Then the things that are likely unrestricted is native meadow and lawn. The golf features are already within the conservation easement. A hand-carry boat launch with unpaved trails, habitat enhancement, picnic tables, native plant arboretum. None of that has a structure, and there isn't a lot of impervious surface that goes along with it. So how does that play out on the site? Well, we provided this map to kind of just do an analysis of some different options or scenarios as far as the amount that you would keep unrestricted. And so in this scheme, it just shows the idea that it's all green, it's all soft. You get the maximum amount of state grants, minimize the expenditure of local funds, and you don't really have any structures within the Wayne Golf Course. Or you could kind of take a middle of the road approach, and I think this is closest to what Jaunty talked about, but this idea of perhaps 4 acres unrestricted total. Perhaps there's 2 acres on the front 9, 2 acres on the back 9. You develop parking lots, you have some structures. There's maybe an arboretum type visitor center or environmental education center. That's another scenario to consider. Is that enough? Or perhaps you go for 8 acres. The front 9 has 4.1 acres now, and so we started looking at that. Like, that's a good example of a fairly large area that would be developable. And so here we just looked at the front and 9. The 4 acres on the back 9 really came out of the fact that it's close to the buffer of Waynita Creek, and none of the committee members, or we didn't hear any input from the public to really minimize that. It was like, no, we want to make this a rich, improved habitat. We don't want to minimize the buffer. We want a good size buffer. So there's a range of some possibilities. Do you save nothing for the structured areas and the more intensive uses, 4 acres, 8 acres? Those are just some scenarios for your consideration. So as an example, the existing front 9 it's 49 acres. It's all but 4.1 is within this King County Conservation easement already. So of that, 15% of that is allowed to be impervious, given the restrictions of the conservation easement. So that would allow us 6.8 acres of impervious. So that's a fair amount of impervious surface, but no structures are allowed, and I think that's the key issue. I mean, not even a picnic shelter or anything like that, but certainly not a building or a restroom. So what does that look like in the front 9? We provided this diagram. We actually took the Arboretum Visitor Center and to scale kind of superimpose that. You can see the orange line is the Burke Gilman Trail. Waynita Drive is the red line. Parking for about 40 stalls. That Arboretum Visitor Center building, and then the yellow circles are just zones of activities. It could be a group picnic area, it could be a sport court, and maybe there's some meadow, gathering meadow, outdoor classroom area here. So that's just a scenario that shows it with the 4.1 acres or so. And for the back 9, we did a similar thing. We kind of looked at this. Well, it'd be nice to save that existing orchard, have a reasonable amount of parking back there, the Arboretum Visitor Center. Maybe there's some group picnic. Maybe there's a small hand-carry boat rental building. It's not really a design, but it's more of a study of the density of buildings. With this scheme, you could see, well, you could say, well, we don't really need 4 acres because all of this stuff could be within the King County Conservation easement and it wouldn't matter. But if that building starts to get a little bigger, then maybe you do need a little bit more room. And that's true on both the front or the back 9. So hopefully this helps to visualize how this might play out. Those are some choice points for you, and with that, I'll turn it back to John.
Thank you, Jim. And one other aspect we've been kind of looking at, been working with Jim on this, is doing a little bit of analysis of future M&O costs for the golf course. So by looking at the bigger picture right now, you can look down at the bottom and see we have about 273 acres of parkland, 24 sites. We also maintain City Hall, 3 fire stations, a downtown beautification, courthouse, police station, Bothell Operations Center, and we also have numerous city trails we are responsible for. So one of the things we're going to have to take a look at is looking at some maintenance and operations analysis, because we do have Nicholas Madrazo Park coming online possibly later this year or early next year. We'll be hopefully adding the rest of the acreage to the North Creek Forest in the not too distant future. And of course, we have the Wayne Golf Course, and we are presently looking after applying for some grant money for the DNR property and possibly the MC Coast property in the future. So we could have the potential for additional parkland. And over there we have, you can see on the left, we have 7 park maintenance staff and 4 seasonals at the present time. So just a little funding update on where we are with the grants. For the front 9, we have $900,000 confirmed. Of that, $400,000 is King County Conservation Futures dollars, and the 2016 legislative appropriation. Front 9 pending are 2 WWRP grants, local parks and water access, both for $1 million. Back 9, we have $800,000 on conservation futures, cooperative watershed management of $600,000, King County Conservation Futures, another $800,000, and surfboard, regular $1 million grant. Back 9 pending, floodplains by design, a ALEA grant, and riparian protection as well. So you can see we're really working on trying to find additional funding. So with Jim's presentation tonight, some of the questions we wanted to pose to council is the consideration of a possible conservation easement for the back 9 with King County. The easement would not only bring revenue to the project, but would primarily prohibit residential, commercial, and industrial development. Also, we had, as Jim mentioned, the 4.1 acres on the front 9 that is not covered by the conservation easement. And one thing we have to look at there is, of those 4.1 acres, do we save 1.2 to 2.2 acres for community building or other use, and have another 2 acres possibly for the RCO grants? So I do my final presentation for the RCO grants in August, and it's something that will be really helpful to know when we go in and do our final presentations. At present, I just submitted it on the assumption that we would have approximately 2 acres that we would use for or try to fund with the state grant money, leaving another 2 acres free. And then, as Jim mentioned, on the back 9, unrestricted area for recreation access as well, similar to the front 9. Would it be 2 acres, 4 acres, no acres? And then our potential next steps, we're still working on our grant presentations and fundraising through 2016. Most of the grants we have to have in final form by August, September at the latest. We'll continue to work together as partners, look for future grant applications, and ultimately we hope property acquisition and master planning process. So that concludes our presentation, and either myself or Jim or Jonty or Michelle will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Director Keates, can you put it back to the questions you want the council to give feedback on? I think it's close to the last slide.
Sorry, I have to go through all the whole thing.
There they are. Okay. So when each of us have an opportunity to talk, please try to address these questions as best you can, or if you don't know, that's fine too. So do we have questions from the council? All right, Councilman Ramey.
Have we talked to the University of Washington at all about them getting involved, and financially how much they'd like to get involved in this project?
We have not directly spoken to UW Bothell, but we do have a member on our committee, David Bain, who's affiliated with the University of Washington, and he has indicated that there likely is some interest, but that's as far as we've taken it, unless David knows more. So,
See. Universities said that they're very interested in having programs out there. However, they do not want to own any of the land or own a building out there. So I think, when you're thinking about maintenance and operation funds, the university may be able to provide some of those and, do some of the staffing. If you do have an environmental education center, they have a lot of teachers in training that would love the opportunity to learn to teach outdoor education kind of things there. But at present, they don't have any direct interest in owning land or a building on the site.
Yeah, I just thought it would be a good marriage if the university is interested in educating the citizens out here, helping us out a little bit. And I understand they don't want to purchase any of the property. That's not that much of an issue, but it would be nice to get some financial backing from them.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Samberg.
So on that slide, I thought I heard you say, do you want us to consider the conservation easement because it brings revenue? Did you say that?
Yeah, the county, obviously, with a conservation easement would probably bring some acquisition funds along with that. We don't know how much that is. We'll have to do an appraisal first.
So it'd be one-time money that King County would pay to purchase an easement?
I believe so. It'd be acquisition funds, and I don't know, Bob's here from King County can address that in much more detail than I could.
Hi, Bob Burns with King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. Actually, John, you were right on the right track there. So what we'll be looking at doing is the county buying a conservation easement over the back nine, which we need to do an appraisal to figure out the exact amount, but the conservation easement actually holds a lot of value. It pulls off the residential, commercial, industrial development potential, and then the city would come in and buy the underlying fee. Without an appraisal, we don't know the exact amount, but it's not unreasonable to think that a conservation easement could be 50% or even more of the acquisition value of the back nine. And then the county would just kind of hold that conservation easement and the city would own the underlying fee.
Okay. And so Director Keates, can you go back a slide to the table where you talk about your potential funding sources? So when you say, Back nine secured has King County Conservation Futures listed twice for $800,000. So those are two separate appropriations of $800,000?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
Two separate years.
Oh, two separate years. Okay. And then, so a conservation easement is not present in this chart because we don't even know the value of that. Is that correct? Okay. Do you, if you have a picture of maybe a rough design that shows like the back nine, do you know approximately like how the Doug Allen fields compare in size to the back nine activity zone?
No, I don't, but that's something I could have our GIS people put together, superimpose a map or something like that.
Okay. And then when you had a slide that showed restricted versus unrestricted revenues, and in the unrestricted revenue column was golf features. And so we could have golf features present in the park that would not jeopardize our ability to use grant funds. Is that correct?
Well, I think that depends on the grant funds, how big the golf feature would be, where it would be located. There's just a lot of moving parts right now with the funding sources and everything that would make that a little bit difficult to answer with complete assurance, but I think it might be possible.
Okay. And then on the survey, I noticed that the survey, one of the survey questions was age. What was the age of the respondent? And over half of the survey respondents were older than 40 years old. And what I thought was interesting is that twice as many people didn't report their age as did report age. So it was like 300 or so people actually reported age and 700 plus didn't report their age. So do you think that that survey was, maybe the results were skewed away from what might be desired by a younger population in Bothell?
Our survey certainly was not a statistically valid survey. We didn't have the money to do that. So, you know, it's very likely that it could be skewed one way or the other. But
John D., will you come up to the microphone?
The age question came up late in the survey with public feedback asking for it. So the early adopters were largely the online bump of our online promotion. So a large amount of people who answered it through online advertisement of the survey didn't represent their age, but typically is a younger profile. And then the Bothell Bridge was the second beat of high uptake on the survey. And yeah, I believe somebody can talk to you about the profile of the Bothell Bridge receivers, but I assume it's of an older age and might reflect the fact that that was represented in that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions at this point, but I do have comment as well. So if you want to ask the council if they have other questions.
Do you want to do your comments now? It's fine. Or would you like to wait to do your comments till later? We do a round of questions and then comments. Sound good?
A round of questions,
All right.
yeah.
In the middle over here, Councilmember Spivey.
Great. Thank you. I want to thank Councilmember Samberg for asking about Doug Allen, and because I've had several people go, 89 acres, how come we can't get some active use sports fields there? We're dying for them in the Bothell community. And I've had several people come to me and ask, why not? So I guess I put that question out to you because we, as you know, we are very short on active use sport athletic fields. And so I know it's a balance, but it is 89 acres, and the ability, especially on the back nine, to get one active use athletic field would be great. I do have a concern. So I guess on the athletic use, I saw it in there, and there was a concern about having an active use athletic field near buffer zones. I guess that's a matter of, is it grass or is it field turf? But is it possible to have that active use on the back nine as a strong consideration?
well, the key thing right now with the back nine is the types of grant money that we're looking at using for the project. So surfboard and grants, for example, and athletic fields are not a good marriage. I'm not sure about the cooperative watershed management grant. I'm not really familiar with that. And so I think that's the big driver right now that would say maybe or no or yes, is just the myriad of potential fundraising of funds from grant sources that are being potentially planned for the back nine.
In the future, could we buy that back? So if we use grant funds to acquire that didn't allow for it, but in the future, could we buy that back and give that money back to those grant funders?
That would probably trigger what they call a conversion, depending on the type of grant that you're looking at. So with the state money, I guess it's probably possible, but you'd have to pay back the money they gave you and at the value that when you did it. So it's, if you did it 10 years after the fact, you're going to pay more actually than what you paid when you actually got the grant money. For conservation futures, I'm not sure on that one. I have to defer to Bob if he knows, but I know for the state grant money, anytime you change a use like that, it triggers it, what they call the conversion.
It's similar for CFT. It's actually, it's within the realm of possible, but it's actually very difficult and can be expensive because you're looking at the value in today's dollars when you do the trade, not what the value was when you bought it.
Okay. And so we get different grant monies to buy the back nine. It's cumulative. How do we know which grant money applies to the parcel that we maybe want to develop?
Well, so far what we've tried to do is take a checkerboard of the back nine and go to the funders and say we're applying this grant here, this grant there, and this grant here. That's been the process thus far.
So we could apply a more flexible grant to an area that we maybe want to have an athletic field in the future.
Possibly. For instance, of all the grants that we have looked at, the only one with any assurance I can tell you that would say without question that would allow a athletic field would be the WWRP local parks grant.
Okay. And then I also noticed that we've got a historic orchard, a historic farmhouse on the properties, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And so I would encourage anything we can do to preserve history. And as well as we've got a historic golf course, really, it's 80 plus years old. It is part of the fabric of Bothell. And I was excited to see that there's the golf features ability there. And I think something as simple as an executive par 3 where it's a smaller footprint still would be a great thing. So I'm hoping that that's a possibility and we can apply those flexible grant funds there also. You think, and then why is there I just feel like there's this dying need to not use the available 4.1 acres to its potential to help offset maintenance costs and things like that. Why is that? We want to downscale that 4.1 acres on the front nine so much to where we could, have active things there that could help generate revenue to provide the M&O.
Oh, sure. Yeah, council, if you decided to want to leave the 4 acres completely unrestricted, you could do that. The only reason the local parks grant that right now we have applied for that area won't allow structures. So you couldn't put a building in, for instance. All you'd be able to do is put in playground features, maybe a picnic shelter, things that the state would quantify as outdoor recreation. So to be able to do that, the recommendation would probably be to not follow through with the local parks grant.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have comments later. Thank you.
3 of us are on the committee, so, Deputy Mayor.
So I think it would be helpful with this slide to show the cost, because it's not showing after these grants what still needs to be raised and how much that 4.1 acres or the 2 or the 6 or whatever we decide would have to be put on a parks levy. I kind of know because I'm on the committee, but I think for the rest of council it would be helpful to understand that piece. I don't know if you want to do that now or get back to us. And as far as the active fields, I've talked about that as well, and I'm just wondering, is there a suitability problem because it's wet? I'm assuming we can't do turf because of the environmental issues.
I'll turn the feasibility of athletic fields over to Jim because he's an expert in that.
Well, there's some great information in the appraisal that was done on the property, and there was some geotechnical investigation done previously, and the Generally, the soils in the back 9 are pretty good as long as you're away from the creek corridor. It's pretty good sandy soil and would support recreational fields. The front 9, which you're not really asking about, I guess, but the front 9 does have a lot of standing water and springs coming out of the hillside and very wet areas, and it makes it really difficult for golf play right now too. So there is feasibility for ball fields. I think I sketched kind of where the 4-acre yellow area was on the back 9 that we showed. I sketched like a soccer field in there at one point, and it fit within that area. Maybe some room for parking and so forth, but the buffer for Waynita Creek, takes up a huge swath of that area. The regulatory buffer, even if you tried to max it out, and then on the other side of Waynita Creek, there's another area over there that could be developed, but it is wetter back there. There's some seeps coming out of the hillside, actual intermittent streams that kind of keep that area wetter, but still it looks reasonably dry, and then the area right around the orchard and the farmhouse is really quite good soil.
And then my next question is regarding the golf features. My understanding is that Councilmember Spivey talked about maintenance. Could you maybe talk a little bit about the maintenance costs involved with the golf course, with keeping it a golf course?
Well, we are reaching out to the golf pro over there to try to ascertain some idea of what the golf costs right now. The only thing I can tell you about a golf course is in a previous job I did manage a 18-hole golf course, and they are expensive to maintain and operate if you're looking for a full 18-hole golf course. If something a little smaller, the maintenance obviously is a little bit less, but you have mowing, fertilizing, you got the greens to take care of, which are pretty problematic, and so on and so forth. So equipment costs, it just adds up real quickly.
And would it have also it seems to me that it would be counter to restoring the environmental aspects of the river, because I assume pesticides are involved in keeping the golf course primo condition.
Yeah, if you did any kind of golf feature, I would think you'd want to keep it well without of the riparian area of the river.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Freed.
We have our cordless mics here tonight. Michelle, nice to see you. It's been a couple months, but nice to see you. Jonty, thanks for coming out tonight. And is it Bob? Thank you all, three of you. John, of course, speaking as well. Interesting opportunities that we see here. A lot of different ideas were presented. It brings a lot of thought to mind what the opportunities might be for the site. The first idea that was presented by Jonty is really how much do we want as a city to invest to keep as active space. I heard you just say, John, that at this point we're pursuing certain types of grants. How many grants out there are available for active use sites without the city having to financially invest?
The active use grants are fairly limited. The state has WWRP local parks. They have what's called the Youth Athletic Facilities Fund. And in King County, there is what's called the King County Youth Sports Facilities Program, although that's pretty limited. The most you can get out of that is $75,000. And there's probably others. I know the Mariners used to have a field grant and some of those things, but those are the ones I'm most familiar with.
Doesn't sound like anything to the tune of $1 million or anything to that extent.
You could ask for $1 million from the WWRP local parks. That's the maximum for acquisition anyway.
How many fields would that allow for?
$1 million? Mm-hmm. Jim, you want to take a run at that? Of course, it depends on the field, but...
Not for land acquisition, but for the actual development of the field.
Will you go up to the microphone, Jim? Thanks.
Are you referring to the development cost of the field or just the land?
Well, we'd have to come up with cash either way, I guess. So if it's for acquisition, if $1 million is available, or if it's only for development, one or the other.
Yeah, I think as I remember, that 4-acre parcel on the back 9 was about enough room for one field. So whatever the value, I think there's some idea of what the value of the land is, because that land has a higher value given that it's outside of the buffers and the wetlands. So do you remember offhand what the cost per acre for the land is? Yeah, so we can check on that and get back on that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know that we're not just faced with the option is how much money, city, do you want to come up with? It's like what other grants really? We'd like to see a real list and how much money is out there for us to consider as a city would look at our involvement in the Wayne Golf Course.
Okay, great.
That'd be helpful.
We'll look into that.
I like the idea of more recreational space. We heard during the presentation that Blythe Park is crowded, and we've been to many parks. I went to one every weekend this summer. It felt, or not summer, but winter, and the North Creek fields are constantly filled. We go up to other fields, they're filled, and we're constantly battling, whether it's football, soccer, lacrosse. I think all of us up here are parents. I think we all are. Yeah, we all are. So we've all experienced this ourselves, trying to find a field for our kids, and some of us are in Shoreline, some of us even have gone to Monroe to find a field that's active. So flat land is extremely rare, and I think that we value that. I mean, look for a piece of property of this size that would be able to have adequate space to even put one soccer field. I think we need to look for the opportunity to put in one, if not two. We have 86, 89 acres, I think, total here. We could afford to take some of that space. So hopefully we as a council and as a city see that as a priority to move forward. Golf is somewhat the devil's sport, at least to me. I enjoy playing it, but I'm terrible at it. When I break 100, it's a good day for me, unlike Tom Agnew, who probably is under 70 on a regular basis. But I do see the value of keeping some form of golf. I did approach Mike McMiniman probably a year and a half ago. At that point, he was not terribly interested just because they're in the midst of getting their facility up and running. But they do operate a golf course down in Oregon, and it's highly successful. He said if there was interest at any point in time, it would be more on a par 3 type golf course, an executive golf course, in that he would probably take the clubhouse and reamp it up, just like he's done across the street. So that might be a great option to consider as a really great feature. As I found investors, as they invested with me in business, they're more likely to invest again. They've certainly invested in our city. And I see that this is an opportunity potentially to present to them, and they're successful in doing it. So I'd like to see us pursue par 9. Doesn't have to be obviously the whole 18 holes there, but if it's par 3, 9 holes, I don't know how many acres that takes up total. They obviously would have to reconfigure it, but I think it's something that we should consider. I've mentioned a pool before. We've heard from Kenmore, we've heard from Woodinville, we've heard from Bothell citizens for a long time, and now most recently from Kirkland, that like to have a regional pool. I see the back 9 as a perfect place on the front part of the back 9 to have a regional pool. It's accessible by all roads lead to the back 9, whether it's Parks or 100th Avenue or 522. There's a lot of accessibility that could go there. This really, I think, is going to take a collaborative effort. Thankfully, we have a lot of tax parcels, but it would take a collaborative effort of a lot of capital and a lot of different areas to pull together. So I think all options should be on the table, and as active as we can make it, wonderful, and protecting the environment at the same time by increasing buffers and improving those buffers. Anything we do almost to that project is going to improve the environment from what currently is occurring there. I have a question directly for King County. Bob, right?
Yeah.
Josh, why doesn't King County take this as their regional park?
Well, we over the last decade, we've kind of gotten out of the park business inside cities. We have a limited amount of funding. We've really focused on regional trails and regional open spaces out in the unincorporated area. There's a definite opportunity to partner with the city on regional trail connections. So we absolutely want to be a partner on that. And I think because of the outreach from the city and the community, to help the city with a conservation easement. We thought it was, with the river flowing through it, an important enough opportunity to partner, but we've really kind of moved out of the local, in-city park business, just given our funding limitations and constraints. But we really love the opportunity to partner with the city. We think partnership is the way to get stuff done, and we're all in on that kind of partnership. But we really are, and have been for about a decade, getting out of the park business inside cities and just focusing out on in the unincorporated areas.
Okay, so that conservation easement could go, for instance, on the back 9, the 39 acres could go on 30 of the acres?
Yeah, I mean, you could be flexible with the conservation easement in terms of where it goes. We've entered into this, I think, thinking there'd be a conservation easement over the whole back 9. I would point out that a conservation easement is different than the restrictions in the funding sources or attached to some of the funding sources. In fact, a lot of the restrictions with those funding sources are more restrictive than a conservation easement. From the county's perspective, what we're really interested in is remove the development potential, but maximize the flexibility for the city to use the land for public benefit, parks, community, and other community benefits. And whether that's passive recreation, active recreation, or other community benefits. But what we wouldn't want to do is go through all the effort and then 5, 10, 20 years from now have a piece of it sold off for private development. That's been our mindset coming into it, is an easement that would protect that part, but then maximize flexibility of the city. And that's where you get that puzzle piece sort of effort to match the funding sources with the different parcels. As you mentioned, that's I think the key to this is how do you land the funding on the different parcels to maximize the other revenue, but create flexibility in different parts of the property where you want it.
Yeah, at this point, it seems like every idea could be a good idea if we can kind of almost and help all parties find interest in preserving the property. You said a lot of flexibility with the conservation easement. Does that include a field?
Sure, conservation easement could allow ball field, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be something that the city and the county would negotiate. Sort of a core conservation easement would be, restrict residential, private residential, commercial, industrial development, but publicly accessible uses are certainly something we could look at in an easement, yeah, as being allowed.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah. John, questions with cost of O&M. I've looked at the vision with the maybe 2 acres on one side, 2 acres on the other that are unrestricted, and the others are restricted. What do we project will be the O&M cost for the city?
We're still developing that, so as a matter of fact, I was having that conversation with Jim today, and I mean, it ranges anywhere from $500 to $1,000 an acre for open space to $8,000-$10,000 an acre for more active type activities. So what we would like to do is just take a look at the property in a number of different scenarios and just do some basic maintenance management planning and try to come up with an approximate figure of what the M&O would be under different use categories, so active, not active, et cetera.
Yeah, I met with Interim City Manager Bob Jean today talking about my desire for a South End fire station. We talked about the capital part of it, but then he also said, but you need to keep in consideration there's probably a $2 million O&M cost with staffing and such. So that O&M consideration for the Wayne Golf Course has to be extremely on the forefront of what we're considering. So how soon do you think we might have that number?
I'm going to need some staff help to do that. That's something I hope we can get done within, say, a couple months. But I did talk to Jim today, and we were looking at numbers for the entire golf course, upwards of $750,000 for something that has a lot of active recreation, as opposed to maybe $150,000 a year for something that's very passive.
Okay, and if we could potentially hand off a quarter of that to a par 3 9-hole golf course to an operator, that might be something to consider. All these things work together. So thank you for your leadership.
Sure, my pleasure. Mayor, I've been told that the Doug Allen sports field is 7.6 acres. For answer Councilmember Samberg's question.
Any further questions? Councilmember McNeal.
I have a lot to say, but I'm going to keep it brief. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for all their hard work and dedication to this project. As we go out and venture into committee meetings around the state and working regionally with other cities, everybody's taking notice of what we're doing right here in Bothell, and especially along the Sammamish River. So for that, I want to thank everybody for their hard work and dedication to this project. Being in the committee, we've had the opportunity to hear a lot more information on some of the work that you guys are performing, John, especially with the King County, the grant process, and what you guys are applying for. I think one thing that actually probably could help us up here would be to have that spreadsheet showing all the different types of grants that you're applying for, like the RCO, et cetera, and having what they can be used for. Some of the things that we talked about in those committee meetings. Is that something that you can get for the council?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think Liz already has something similar. It will say what the grant is, how much it is, but it won't have what it can be used for. But I think that's something we could extrapolate out and put together relatively easy.
Okay. The M&O, as Councilmember Freed mentioned, is very important, and we talk about that quite a bit on making sure that as we're going through the grant process and we're applying for grants, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence on what the asset will actually cost the city in the long term. So is that's something that the committee has been looking at? As a whole, you're going to bring that back to us, but have you guys been looking at that the entire time?
The maintenance and operation?
Yes.
Somewhat. I don't think the committee's delved into that in great detail. I have, though, with Jim more one-on-one.
Okay. And then Deputy Mayor mentioned the cost of the entire project and having that breakdown where it says funding update on this slide right here. Being able to tell front nine what's secured, front nine pending, and what the total cost of that front nine would be very helpful to see all that. And then also with these grants, what these grants could be used for may be helpful. There was a slide that the mayor had asked to have put up about what our opinion is on 3 or 4 items, I think it was.
Yeah, so we're going to do another round of, it's not really deliberation, but just comments. And I'm hoping that we can bring that slide up and everybody weighs in on those topics.
Okay. Well, I guess my opinion on the front nine part of that piece would be that the 4.1 acres, and Jim, I think, alluded to this, to me seems like it would be very beneficial regionally for us to ensure that we make sure that we, take this dream project that we've talked about and ensure that we have people coming from all across the state and they have access to this land. So I think understanding what that cost would be on that 4.1 acres would be very beneficial, as well as the back nine and preservation of the historical apple orchard and any buildings on the back nine. I think would be very important to see what that cost would be, if not part of a grant process. Because if I'm understanding correctly, if we don't get the grants to pay for those, or the grants aren't available for those uses, then the city, the citizens would have to step up and pay for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you can't get grant money, the money would have to come from somewhere. And I'll also tell you that another challenge with the grants is each grant has a matching component. So, for instance, a lot of state grants you can't match with another state grant. So that just adds another element to the puzzle, so to speak, and how you're trying to put together a fundraising strategy. So the grant portion of it actually is getting quite complicated. So that's another challenge that council should know.
So I guess it would be interesting to see if we could form private partnerships and who that would look like. As Councilmember Freed mentioned, McMenamins, is there somebody out there or private entities out there that would be willing to step up and take on some of that, those costs for the M&O? So I'd be curious to see what that would look like and if we can look at that possibly as well. Thank you.
So I just have a couple quick questions, and then we'll open up for the second round. We're getting close to our break time. Is everybody okay to slog through? Okay. So I see. So for Tara, could you just give us the cost of that you owe on that you borrowed on the front nine and the back nine?
Absolutely. And in fact, I was just talking with Jonty. I mean, we got to work through what the financing's going to be because it depends on when the property's acquired. But the raw acquisition cost was 10.125 for both pieces. Their closing costs, holding costs, our costs, financing costs. So we need to sit down with Bob and John and work out those details for you. But I mean, you can figure it's probably north of 11 million by the time you deal with the financing altogether. And I think the big issue right now is some of these grants that are being applied for are not going to have the flexibility. I would suspect some of the Salmon Recovery Funding Board grants and the watershed recovery grants are not compatible with a Par 3 concept because they're really focused on habitat and they may not see that interface as being acceptable. So while it might help you on the M&O, it may create more cost on the acquisition side. So I think this is a really complex puzzle as it goes, but it'd be great, to start getting feedback from the council as we craft that. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Do you have like a rough break on the front and the back 9?
On the, can we come back to you? I just don't want to misstate it and give you a wrong number to operate off of. It's about 7+ on the back and 3+ on the front. But I don't want to give you information that's not sufficiently accurate.
Oh, that's fine. It's just ballpark. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Mr. Burns, so King County uses the same grant funding sources to fund the conservation easement. Is that correct?
For part of it, because you can only use CFT for no more than 50%, so we'll have to find some match. And then I think, as has been alluded to multiple times, as we sort of stitch together the final plan, where do you land grant money to make sure that we've both assembled enough dollars but maintain the flexibility that we want. So yes, CFT is a primary funding source for us. It comes with funding restrictions, but we're mindful of the kind of flexibility that we're talking about maintaining as we stitch together sort of the final puzzle pieces. We'll look for other funding sources for the rest of if there's a needed remainder.
Okay. And then Director Keates, you mentioned, because in the process right now, we've just basically accomplished a visioning process just to try to figure out funding. Is that, so with the next process, what would that look like? I mean, a full-fledged park planning process. What happens during that?
Well, once the city acquired the property, master planning process would be similar to what we've done for Park at Bothell Landing or Blythe Park or any of the other parks. Since we've got Jim here, I'll just have him go through a hypothetical master planning process because he does them all the time. So. Sure.
Yes, the typical master plan process would involve quite a bit of public involvement, trying to find out, really drill into what the public wants to see on the site, what kind of uses and activities. We call that programming. There would be a lot of background site data you would have to collect, additional wetland delineations, geotechnical studies, fish and wildlife studies, archaeological studies. Those kind of things often are collected at that time so that you're creating a design that's feasible with the regulatory process. And then once you have all that background information put together, usually prepare about 2 or 3 different alternatives to present to the public and council. And then from that, develop a draft master plan, again, more comments, and then a final master plan, cost estimate, and maybe phasing is often included, and perhaps looking at implementation grants at that time.
So is it safe to say at this point, because we just completed a visioning process, that it's really difficult to say whether or not we can put a ball field or a swimming pool or a civic center of certain size or anything like that? I mean, really what the conversation I think we're having is, how much money does the city, how much the land, I should say, is the city willing or desires to keep unrestricted so that we can do things in the future? That's really where we're at, right? We're not trying to hash out what facilities we're actually going to scope out. That would be the future process.
Yes, I think that would be more appropriate for the vision process because you don't have all of that background information, and you want to hear more from the public as you get into more detail. And when you start delineating wetlands and looking at other constraints, that might change how you look at things. So.
Okay, great. So that's all the questions I have for now. Let's open it up for the second round. So can you go back to the slide's already there. There it is. So during your comments during the second round, please try to address these questions. And if you have any, is there any further questions you need to ask, does the council have that you need to ask to answer these questions? Councilmember Freed.
My question would be, Forterra has to make full by 3 years, I believe, right? Why can't grants be applied for now and pieces of the property be bought and not have to wait for 3 years? You can do that. Okay.
Okay. So is there any questions on these bullets? We're good to go. Okay. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Agnew.
Sure. Well, you know, I think this is going to be really great for the citizens. My vision is if we can purchase this without being a burden to the taxpayers, it's a win-win for everybody. I also understand that in trying to purchase this, the grants that we're going to be going for are not going to be one to put in aquatic centers or a lot of ball fields, unfortunately. They're going to be the ones that want to repair it and get it back to nature. And I'm good with that. You know, I'm probably going to miss the golf course more than anybody. I learned to play golf there. I love the apples in the back. They're some of the best apples in the city. I'm telling you that right now. You ought to go get some of them bad boys and make some pies. And I'll even be up at 10:30 tomorrow night to watch the first start of the British Open. So, I mean, I'm going to be sad to see it go, but I also am a realist. And I understand that for us to purchase this without burdening the taxpayers, it's not going to be used the way it's used now. I'm all for the conservation easement on the back nine, getting with King County. I'm all for trying to save 4 acres, maybe 2 on the front, or 1.5 on the front and 2.5 on the back. I would like to see some of it for recreational activity, i.e. a playground. Up on top of that hill, there's a lot of new houses going in with a lot of new kids, and it would be a great place for them to just walk down and go have a great time at the park. I'm excited about this. I think it's going to be great for the citizens. If we can connect all these, which has been a vision of the city for 20, 30 years, is connecting Blythe and the Wayne Golf Course. And we can accomplish that without burdening the taxpayers too much. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Who would like to go next? Councilmember Samberg.
I'm going to start with the last question. I would support this, us creating as much recreation, active field space on the back nine as possible, even on the front nine, but I'll get to that in a minute. Like we've heard before, we have a deficit of active play fields in this city. It's identified in the PROSAP. We hear about it from members of the community. And I think it's really important that when we have almost 90 acres to preserve, that we consider preserving more than a few percent for active use. And so what we've heard tonight is that in the back nine, those soils are really appropriate. They drain well. And when I'm talking about active fields, I'm thinking about Doug Allen as a model. It's not, a specifically lined field, but that play field, Doug Allen Field, is scheduled all the time for multiple groups. It gets such active use, and I think that that our city desperately needs more of that in the city. And we heard that that would still be applicable for a conservation easement funding model. So that answers the question, I think, for bullet point number 1, which is, should we consider a conservation easement on the back nine? Yes, especially since we heard tonight that playfields, active playfields, would not be incompatible with that. So that's how my position on bullet points 1 and 3. And then when we talk about the front 9, I agree too that we could take this opportunity to preserve the history that exists in those 90 acres. And one of those things could be adaptive reuse of one or more buildings that already exist there. I sat in one of the visioning workshops, and I was kind of disappointed that the crowd that was there was really against disc golf, foot golf, golf course, mini golf, any kind of golf features, when that is the history of that parkland. And so I would hate to rule out some of those uses. And I think foot golf or a pitch and putt golf course could be environmentally compatible in that area, and serve as a draw for regional activity and provide recreation. So I hope we don't close the door on that option. I don't know. I don't think it would support an 18-hole course. It might not even support a 9-hole course. But it seems like it could support something that's smaller that still captures that history of Wayne Golf Course. I'm not particularly in favor of an interpretive center on the front 9. I think an interpretive center is a big expense, and maybe I don't know if we ask that. We don't always ask these questions the way we want, but I think the front 9 would be great for, again, active space, playground, picnic shelters. I think investment in a visitor center or an interpretive center is a pretty huge investment. And structures are expensive, and I don't think we need a structure to appreciate the nature that we're trying to preserve there. And if we didn't have a big structure there, that would free up space for some of these other active recreation uses. And when I went to that meeting, I thought the community, in their responses, they were pretty lukewarm of any kind of community center there. So I don't know if community center means something different in other people's minds, but there didn't seem to be a lot of support for community center, at least at that one meeting that I went to. And we'd have to go back and look at the 1,000+ survey respondents. You'd mentioned, and the other thing is the interpretive center was justified, possibility as a revenue generating facility, with a cafe and that sort of thing. Well, that was voted down too in the meeting. People didn't like that. They didn't like the idea of a cafe there. So I'm not in support of a visitor center concept there. And I think we have to be, I want to see us focus a little bit more on active recreation, because if we don't, what this is a nature preserve. It's not a regional park. And that's fine. If that's what it's going to be, is a nature preserve, then we just advertise it as such. But I think that might not meet the expectations of some members of our community. I guess that's all.
That's it? Okay. Who would like to go next? Councilmember Freed?
We could save a lot of time by just saying ditto, and I appreciate it, and I endorse everything you just said. On point number 1, I am certainly fine with the conservation easement, and Councilmember Samberg said it still allows for active use parks. And point number bullet I guess it's just the bullet, 2 there, 4.1 acres, which is basically the parking lot and restaurant or where you pay your fee. I'd like to see kept that active. It's not as part of the conservation easement at this point. And as Councilmember Samberg said so clearly, we definitely have a need for active use in the city of Bothell, as we all know quite well. So I'd like to see whatever we could do, whether a portion of it or all of it, to the maximum extent financially feasible and reasonable. I'd like to pursue that. So those are my comments. So I appreciate it.
Who would like to go next? Deputy Mayor.
I neglected to thank all of our partners. It's been a huge learning experience for me, and now I'm probably spoiled in terms of thinking that, of course, everyone just comes in and supports your community when you want to buy a park. But I thank you all for all of your support and help. I'm a little bit torn because I feel like looking at that little red stepladder thing, it's a balance between how much do we pay. Obviously, we'll have to go out for a parks levy bond, and so how much do we want to invest in Wayne, and then how much do we attempt to even things up by gaining some land for active use in Snohomish County for park use. I would say a golf course would not be on my priority list at all. I think that precludes a lot of these grants. Well, I guess not the grants, but it was very low on the list of what people would like to see. And my understanding is that the reason golf courses all over the place are going out of business is because they're not making money. As far as answering the questions, definitely yes on the conservation easement. I too, I have a few ties to the lacrosse world, the local lacrosse world, and I can speak to the lack of field space. And so I'm definitely in favor of saving probably at least 4 acres on the back 9 and 2 on the front. I guess I would like to leave the option open after we go through a more formal master planning to have those active fields, but also perhaps some sort of revenue generating. Maybe we can have a lease for some sort of business that might help with maintenance and operation costs. I know King County has some experience with that, so I'm hoping that they can give us some guidance. And I think I answered all of the questions. Thanks.
Councilmember Spivey.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for being here. I too agree or would echo Councilmember Samberg and Councilmember Freed's comments, and then in that I agree with the conservation easement as long as we can work with King County to have the flexibility to have active use athletic fields with that conservation easement. The unrestricted area on the front 9, that 4.1 acres, even if we're the consideration of keeping this more of a passive use, you got to have parking. And to think that parking is going to occur at Blythe Park, the majority of it, there's no parking there on a summer day. You're going to have to put parking in. And I'm not sure 4.1 acres on the front 9 is enough to do the things that we want unrestricted. So yes, I want to preserve the 4.1 acres as unrestricted, and we might have to consider a little bit more. And then that goes the same on the back 9. If you're creating a place for people to go, you got to park them, and that's going to be unrestricted. That'll be an unrestricted use, and the fact that the back 9 is probably the best for active use athletic fields. That's I'm all for that. Let's create that spot there for those, and the appropriate parking to go there, and the bathrooms, and that everything that it's going to need. And then through the whole thing, it's important to preserve our history, to know where we've come from. we went through and we preserved and helped move the North Creek Schoolhouse. We worked with a private partner to preserve the Anderson building. There's, we've got our Main Street that I hope someday would kind of reface itself to what it used to look like, the historic frontage of Main Street, to bring back some of that history. And if we let the history of Wayne Golf Course, the orchard, the farmhouse, and some form of golf, I'm not saying an 18-hole, again, an executive par 3 9-hole, Bellevue's got one, and it's it's well loved. It's a great space to walk through also, but we need the active use. There's a blend here. I agree 100% that we can do things to help the health of the river, and I think we should be buying up those parcels with the monies first, and leaving the other parcels that we want active use, leave those for later, because maybe then we can float a bond for those. But North Creek Forest, we got the DNR property and the property next to that, and then we got people talking about the West Hill Woods. We're buying up a lot of and working with groups to get a lot of open space. We got to help the people. Our people have to recreate. The NFL is running a program called Play 60 because people aren't recreating enough and being out there and being active. So here's our opportunity to help create activity for people. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Councilmember McNeal.
Thank you, Mayor. So bullet point 1, consider conservation on the back 9, all in for seeing what we can do there on conservation easement. One of the things that I've often thought about in reviewing some of the things that have happened recently in other cities is there was a deal in Tacoma where they had something was put together, and I think Gene with Forterra was there, where they did transfer development rights. So, maybe looking at something like that for the back 9 or parts of the front 9 would be good. Unrestricted recreation for the 4.1 acres. The front 9 of that golf course is near and dear to me, as it is to almost every council or all council members up here. I learned how to golf there. My wife taught my wife to golf there, and my kids actually golf there now. But the one thing I've learned through this entire process is, as a council member, I must listen to my community. I must listen to what they want, and take it objectively and say, what are all the things that we need, and what do they want? And through this process, I've learned with the survey that the city wants many different things. And I think if we listen, and I think if we look at how can we partner with others like King County, Forterra, we may come to a conclusion where we can preserve the 4.1 acres on the front 9 with a partnership similar to, and I'm not saying this would be an aquatic center, but recently I learned that the city of Sammamish built their aquatic center with the help of the YMCA. So finding those types of partnerships may help us find the funding sources that we need long-term for the M&O so that we can maintain it and continue to run it without putting that large burden upon the community. As far as the unrestricted 4 acres, I would love to see that. I would love to see to make sure that we have water access for the community to be able to get down to the river. I'd love to see that on front and back. I'd love to see the front and back somehow connected. And extremely important is making sure that we connect our trail system, front, back, Blythe Park, Bothell Landing, Tolt Pipeline, all of these assets that we have, all these wonderful things that we have. Let's make sure that during this process, we figure out a way to connect them all and make sure that people will engage and come to our community to take advantage of the asset that we have. So as far as I'm all in, as Bob said, I'm all in to make sure that this can happen. And anything that we can do to make sure that we're reaching out to other partners and finding solutions, I think would be a great thing. So thank you.
So this has been an amazing journey actually with our group. I've been on the committee with Deputy Mayor and Councilmember McNeal, and it's this is one of those projects you quite frankly can't mess up. There's just a lot going behind it. I'm the chair of the Wire Salmon Recovery Council, and the buzz there about this project is deafening. It's really woken up the whole region, basically, that we could actually do these types of things. And it's not just conservation for salmon recovery, but just actually trying to create spaces in a very dense urban area inside the urban growth boundary where people can actually have green spaces and recreational opportunities. So this project will happen. I don't have any doubt in my mind about it. It's a matter of how much does the city want to pay. We've heard a lot about different ideas of different activities and uses on the land. And really, to me, all of us will probably be not on this council by the time there's actual development of this property, whether it's 2 acres or 4 acres. To me, looking into the future, what I would like to do is try to maximize the opportunities for future councils and the community to decide. So on the 2 lower bullets there, I would say basically whatever we think we can afford. So the 4.1 acres on the front 9 and the 4 acres on the back 9 are the most expensive parts of the entire 90 acres. So people need to keep that in mind. Yes, the grand total is a ballpark figure of 11 million, but the actual value of the land in those 2 specific areas is probably half of that cost. And so we got to keep that in mind when we're talking about, like, we want sports fields and parking lots and swimming pools and everything else there. Even at 8 acres, we're probably going to have to come up locally with half of the money to just preserve the land in public ownership. So, but anyhow, I would be supportive of that as long as we have the appetite to take on that debt, or not debt, but to take on that cost. The conservation easement, I've worked in municipal local governments for 16 years, and I've been really impressed with King County's willingness and commitment to working with us. Not that they don't always do that, but I mean, it really is impressive that that they're there at the table offering to help us try to get this in public ownership. So there is green spaces where we are going to be very developed here in the future. I think it's by 2040, there's 2.6 million more people coming to Pierce, Cayuga, and Homish County inside the urban growth boundary. That's a lot of people. And so just having these little spaces, they mean a lot now, but they're going to mean a lot more by 2040. So I think I answered all of your bullet questions there. And yeah, I look forward to moving forward with this project. We wanted to bring this to the council because you started to see the funding pile up. I mean, like I said, it's not just Bothell, King County. We think this is a great idea. The entire region is backing this. The state has really come up big time to support this. And basically, if we wanted to, we could probably get all of this land for free, but it would be in conservation. There isn't funds out there really to make this into an active park space unless we come up with the money. So it was really good to hear from the council and to get your guys' temperature on, which way do you want us to go with this? And I think we've gotten our direction, so it's greatly appreciated. It would be good to get some feedback. Not right now. I think we're ready for a break, but how often would the full council like to hear about this? Because I hear about this every 2 weeks, and so we're pretty up to date on information. And I don't want it to be the kind of situation where we get too far down the road and come back to council and it's not something the full body would like. So maybe just ping Bob Jean or John Keates and let us know. Let the committee know how frequently we should do this. I feel like this was a little too late. I think we should have probably came and talked to you guys sooner as a full body. So I would expect to hear from the committee a little more frequently going forward, because decisions are going to have to be made pretty rapidly here pretty soon. So with that, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Well, let's just make it, we'll start back up at 8:45 to 9 o'clock. And so we're in recess.